what was discovered was while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, where you've rebuilt your life and yourself, you're going to move through 5 proven predictable stages.
Toxic relationships are riddled with betrayal. To talk about how to heal from betrayal, I'm being joined by Dr. Debi Silber, the founder of Betrayal Transformation Institute, to share what does betrayal do to us, as well as how do we heal from it. Today, I'm being joined by Dr. Debi Silber, who's going to talk about betrayal. She's actually the founder of Betrayal Transformation Institute. And I'm fascinated by this topic because I have suffered massive betrayals myself. And yet I know that we really haven't dived into this topic. So why don't you first introduce what a betrayal is, and maybe even share a little bit about how you got interested into it. And then we can get into the nuts and bolts of what happens when there's a betrayal in a relationship.
Sounds great. I don't think anybody says, I think I just really want to I'm just interested in the topic of betrayal. No, you study because you have to. I'm in business 33 years, health, mindset, personal development. Then I had a really painful betrayal from my family. I thought I did all I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened again. This time it was my husband. So that was the deal breaker. Got him out of the house, looked at the 2 experiences thinking, okay, what's going on here? Clearly there's something that has to change. And I'm one of those people that really believes if nothing changes, nothing changes. So that I couldn't find a book, a course on anything to really get me out of this mess. So I decided to enroll in a PhD program. It was in transpersonal psychology of transformation and human potential. And I really just wanted to get myself out of this mess. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to find the time. I had 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving practice. And then it was time for a study. So I studied betrayal. And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changes really everything we know. But to answer your question, I define betrayal as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them. So the closer we are, the more we depend on that person, the deeper the betrayal. So a child, let's say, who's completely dependent on their parent, that's going to have a different impact than your best friend sharing your secret.
Yeah, that's profound. And I love that definition because it captures it so well that we do make assumptions in a relationship. Maybe we're not aware of them, but we do make them. I'm thinking obviously the biggest one is partnership. Some of us, not all of us, but there may be, if there was clarity, we assume there's exclusivity and that there's going to be monogamy, but there's also assumptions of respect and trust and other types of things. So help me understand sort of the spectrum of betrayal, because like you just said, there's a level of different types of betrayal. And I also think that childhood betrayal often goes undiscussed and unrecognized, but is probably just as deeply impactful as adult partnership betrayals.
You see it so often. Let's say there was some sort of betrayal in childhood. Well, then we grow into our adult lives and some of these relationships become, not that they're good, they're just so familiar. We know how these work. We know where our place is, let's just say, in these relationships. And until and unless it's intentionally and deliberately looked at, we just go from relationship to relationship with these same ideas in place. And here's what's even crazier. It doesn't even have to be necessarily a betrayal in childhood. We can perceive it as one. Like, for example, let's say there's a child who has this earth-shattering news to share with mom or dad, runs into the kitchen, let's say mom's on the phone, and she shushes, let's say a little boy. Well, this little boy can make that mean I'm not important. And what we feed grows. So now let's say he takes that into his adult life, I'm not important. Well, think about what he would expect in his relationships. So it could be something that we made it mean something, or it could, truly be a betrayal. But these things follow us around until we clean them up.
So how do they range? Is there kind of different levels of damage done by different types of trauma or betrayal? I guess I'm really speaking of betrayal, which is a trauma.
What's so interesting? When I was doing my research, I assumed, you're not supposed to assume anything as a researcher. I was new at this, but I assumed that the people who were the hardest hit would grow the least, because they had the most to overcome. That had nothing to do with it. It was the ones that were willing. The willingness had such a bigger impact than time, because people always say, how long does it take? Willingness has so much more to do with it. The ones who just put their head down and said, I am not picking it up until I'm out the other side, blew the doors off of some of the other ones. And actually, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And this will be clear if I share the discoveries a little bit later on, but just to give you an idea, the first group, this was the group, they had their story, they were sticking with it. They just refused to let go of that story.
Can you give an example?
Like they were betrayed, and no matter who they met with, who they spoke with, whatever was happening in their lives, that was the story. And so they
became sort of like the centerpiece of their life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Instead of it becoming, let's say, a pivotal chapter of their story, it became the story. The second group, this was the group that was numbing, avoiding, distracting. So maybe they ran to the doctor who put them on a mood stabilizer, anti-anxiety med. Maybe they were emotionally eating. Maybe they were drinking, numbing in front of the TV, whatever it was. It may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. They didn't heal. And the third group, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of financial fear, religious reasons, not wanting to break up the family, whatever it was, they just did all they could to turn the other cheek, look the other way. I saw two things with this group. Number one, a further deterioration of the relationship. And two, this group by far was the most physically sick.
Yeah. And I have a feeling, well, I can think of a lot of people falling in all three camps, but that last camp, that's a big camp because there's a lot of failed acknowledgement of betrayal in our society.
And it's a very different thing. It was very different than the ones who their relationship crashed and burned and they built something entirely new and then got back together. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the group that just tried to look the other way or act like it didn't happen or whatever.
Do you find that the one doing the betraying knows that it's a betrayal?
You know, I don't know if they've necessarily categorized it, but I have seen there are two types of betrayers. There's the type where this was the absolute biggest shakeup for them as it was for the betrayed. There's huge potential there. They realized they just broke the heart and trust of the very person who loves and trusts them the most. And it can be as profound of a wake-up call as it is for the betrayed. Then there's the group, they're just, on to the next. It's someone else's problem. And they just minimize, negate the whole thing, don't really feel like dealing with it, for whatever reason. And there are many, not any, which excuse the behavior, but they have all of their reasons.
And do you find that betrayers tend to fit into certain categories? Because I was thinking of the cluster B personality types that definitely, I have a feeling they tend to be frequent betrayers.
Yeah, there's really very little to work with when that's the experience. And I teach this idea of how do you really know if it's safe and in your best interest to heal and rebuild with someone or to heal and move along? And clearly, if someone isn't even willing to acknowledge what they've done, there's no remorse, there's no empathy, there's no regret, there's no apology, there's no, what are you working with there, right? I mean, when we're trying to rebuild, that's what you're getting at this point in time, their current level of consciousness, this is what you're getting. So if you're rebuilding with someone and that's their attitude, what really are you expecting that's going to be any different than what you've had?
You're reminding me of a story that's late in that second marriage. It was highly disastrous. I don't know how much you know my story, but I was widowed. And then I got into a second disastrous marriage with probably I couldn't have picked more childhood perfect, worst of all the worst in one person. So I found this one person that had all the worst qualities, and he claimed he had a sex addiction. These days now, I know he's probably a psychopath. So anyway, was it a sex addiction or just entitlement? That's out for debate. But he said to me late in the marriage when I'm really looking for an out, he said, Karen, you just have to accept that I have a sex addiction and what you're going to do about that. So yep, there was I am who I am and what I am. And you're right. There's no changing that individual.
No. And what's interesting is I see so many people, the betrayed, making excuses for the betrayer. Well, they have a sex addiction. Oh, they've had a lot of trauma. They've had well, you've had stuff too. Does that give you a free pass? Why is it that you have whatever restraint or integrity not to betray? But here you are making excuses for someone who's absolutely doing this to you.
Absolutely. You're right. Absolutely. And I also know that those of us who are in those types of relationships know that if we were to pull anywhere similar degree to what they've done to us, we probably wouldn't still be breathing.
Exactly. It's so amazing. And that's something that I often do where I switch it and I say, okay, and I'll even ask, how much of this, let's just take numbers, 100% best case scenario. That's all you can possibly have here and all you can be possibly working with. What's the percentage of how much you're giving as opposed to, your partner? And it's usually 80-20,
Yeah.
Would you ever even consider giving 20% to a relationship? So It becomes clear when we switch it.
Right. Yeah, it does. It is a shocking thing. Have you come across Jennifer Freed's work, Betrayal Blindness? Yeah.
I used a lot of her research when I was doing my own study.
Help us understand better why we don't see the betrayals in the beginning. I found the story in the book particularly fascinating of the woman whose husband, I think it was her husband or partner, was picked up for child pornography. And there was literature around the house. And the detective actually showed it to her and said, "What do you think of this?" And she said, "Well, it sits here on the coffee table or whatever." And it was later she looked back at it and said, "Oh my goodness, it was inflammatory content. I don't know why I didn't see it." Yeah. But she didn't see it. The detective kind of noted her eyes glazed over as if she couldn't take in what was happening.
Well, think about it. If we see something, we have to acknowledge it. If we acknowledge it, we have to do something about it. If we have to do something about it, it's going to create a huge shakeup. So that could be it right there. If we take that first step towards it, it's going to really create a huge bunch of chaos. I did 2 TEDx talks, and in the first one, I talk about how sometimes it's like we're holding our finger to keep this pebble in place, because if we let this go, there's going to be an avalanche, right? And that's really, it takes a tremendous amount of energy just to keep things in place. And I think a lot of us do it that way. Yeah.
But it takes a tremendous amount of energy to also be in a state of denial.
Oh, yeah. I have a saying, and it works. I haven't found a topic it hasn't worked for. I've been using this 33 years in my business, and it's hard now, easy later. Easy now, hard later. Take your pick. It's going to be one of those two. When it comes to betrayal, there is nothing less than hard now, easy later. But here's where people say, "Oh, but I'm so miserable. This isn't, what are you saying easy now?" I'm saying easy now because until and unless you do something radically different, you're going to have the same thing. But that's what people are so afraid of. They will take the familiar known, really just because it's the familiar known, instead of venturing into something that could potentially be so much healthier, so much better. I mean, that's the beauty of the discoveries. It shows all of that. And happy to share them if you want to hear.
Yeah, but before you get there, John Gottman looked at the 24 steps of betrayal, like at the progression. Do you agree that there is a progression that leads up to the massive betrayal? Can you talk about that? Did you see that there's sort of this incremental movement towards a massive betrayal? Or do you think betrayal is just going to happen like suddenly they go from, "Oh, I'm all in and everything's great," to, "Oh, and now I've cheated"?
Yeah, I think there are way too many reasons why people betray that I couldn't say it has to be this sort of growing thing. There are just too many reasons.
Like, what are some of them, for example?
A sense of entitlement, unhealed trauma, a different way to numb, where one person uses alcohol, another person chooses a person, right? It's just, there are so many things they're unwilling to look at and see. So however they escape themselves. I mean, it's endless.
So talk about the stages that happen. When you're the one being betrayed, what happens to the survivor?
So that was actually the third discovery.
Okay.
And what was discovered was that while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, which I'm happy to share, to this completely rebuilt place where you've rebuilt your life and yourself, you're going to move through 5 proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we now know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at each stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Healing's entirely predictable. Happy to share the stages.
Yeah, that's exciting, actually.
Yeah, that for me, this was the most exciting of the 3 discoveries. And so the first is before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, what I saw with everybody, me too, was a heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, and kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, if the table only has 2 legs, it's easy for that table to topple over, right? That's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day. This is by far the scariest of all of the stages. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So right here, you've ignited the stress response. You are now headed for every stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. None of this makes sense. You can't wrap your mind around what happened. And your worldview is shattered, right? Our mental model, the rules that govern us. Trust this person, go here, these are the rules. And in one series of moments or one moment, everything you've been holding to be real and true has bottomed out. The bottom has bottomed out and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. That's why stage 2 is the most terrifying. But if the bottom were to bottom out, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything or anyone in order to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerging. This is the most practical out of all of the stages. I imagine most people you see are in this stage. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this? Where do I go? Who can I trust? Yeah. And here's the trap, though. This is the stage that most people get stuck in. Here's why. Once you've figured out how to survive your experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma you just came from, we think it's good, right? And it feels better than where we came from. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we park here. We're not supposed to. We don't know that. And 4 things start to happen. The first thing is we start getting all those small self-benefits. We get our story. We love our story, right? We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to, the whole victim thing. We get to be right. We get someone to blame. So we plant deeper roots. And because we're here again longer than we should be, now the mind's like, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper. Everything that narcissist or whatever was telling us, we believe it, right? Yeah. Now, because we're here longer than we should be, and these are the thoughts we're thinking, this is the energy we start putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. So now we start attracting relationships and people and circumstances to confirm this is where we belong. Here, right here, is where we may be healing, but we will sabotage our healing because we're afraid to outgrow our betrayer. Here's where we join that lame support group, and now we will sabotage our healing because we found our people. Here's where we go to a therapist who's, let's say, not very highly skilled in betrayal trauma. And we feel heard, validated, and understood, and we were actually gluing ourselves to stage 3, right? It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad and so hopeless, but we don't know where there's anywhere else to go, right here we start numbing, avoiding distracting, right? Just to get us through our day. So we do it for a day, a week, a month, a year, 20 years. I can see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating you're doing, right? That drinking, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they look at me like I have 6 heads. See, it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It almost, to me, becomes part of the identity. I am a victim. It happened to me.
And the longer they're there, the less able they're willing to even look at the idea that there's a version of them waiting. Transformation doesn't even happen until stage 4. Can I get you out of stage 3?
So how do you leave stage 3?
Yeah. So if you're willing, here's that big word right here, willing to let go of the story and all that's brought you, grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things we need to do. We move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where we acknowledge, I can't undo any of that happened, but I control what I do with it. Even in that decision, we've just turned the stress response down. We're not healing just yet, but at least we stopped the massive damage we'd been accumulating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved. If you've ever moved to a new house, office, whatever, like it's this sort of hopeful excitement. Like, we can do this, we got this, right? But think about it. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent who you're ready to become. And what I found was there's this one spot as people move from stage 3 to stage 4. If your friends weren't there for you, you're done. That lame support group, you're done. The betrayer who's not changing, you're done, right? We see it so often in this
kind of a cleansing.
Yeah. Transformation is beginning now. Anyway, when we've settled into this new space, we've made it kind of mentally our new home. We move into the 5th most beautiful stage, and this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal, self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise, all that stuff. We didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now we do. The mind is healing, making all kinds of new rules, new boundaries. We have a new worldview based on everything we're seeing so clearly. And the 4 legs of that table, in the beginning, it was all about physical and mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
I want to go back to the first stage where we're just leaning into the first 2 legs, not all 4 legs. Why do you think that's happening?
Autopilot. We have so much to do. We're just so busy. We're following and abiding by the rules of that relationship. And we're just going about our business, living our lives, not questioning or not even thinking we have to, right? So that's why it's such a shock to the body, to the mind, to the heart, because it's without our awareness or consent, someone chose to break those spoken or unspoken rules. So it completely just demolishes us.
I can already hear the questions that some may want to ask, which is, can you spot a betrayal coming before it happens? Maybe this is like an impossible question, but still.
Yeah, there are so many reasons why, why they could happen. And here's the thing, I don't know, from a spiritual perspective, I don't know who your audience is, but, on some level, like I was told this was a soul contract, where he needed something so devastating to crash and burn and wake up and become the husband, father, friend he's supposed to be. I needed to crash and burn so I can come from this deep place of knowing. I remember seeing somebody say, oh my gosh, you're going to have an institute. You're going to have all these books on betrayal and this big following around betrayal. And I thought she was crazy, right? So it's like, you truly, how do you know? What I can tell you though, is how many people say, I kind of sensed something wasn't right, but we turn our intuition down because if we turn that intuition up, we have to confront something that we may not be ready or willing to see.
Yeah, that certainly was the case in my situation. Here I thought myself madly in love, and yet I'm hiring a private investigator to do a background check. Like, do you think that's a problem? Yeah, maybe that's telling me something. Have you ever seen a betrayal destroy somebody?
Yeah, that's what stage 2 is. And especially, I'm a highly sensitive empath, with integrity as my highest value.
Yeah.
Right. So it almost doesn't get worse. The only thing that I imagine worse than betrayal is losing a child. Thankfully, I have no experience in that. So, yeah. I mean, this is because think about it. This was the person who gave you that sense of safety and security, right? So when this is the person who takes that very sense of safety and security away, it's traumatizing. And that's exactly why the first discovery was that betrayal is a different type of trauma and it needs to be handled a different type of way. Because what many people do is they treat betrayal as just a regular type of trauma. Listen, there's no better or worse. They all stink. And the reason why this first discovery came about was because originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. I'm all about the what can we do about it thing, the upside of it. But I realized post-traumatic growth is, I don't know, I kind of look at it as the upside of whatever that trauma is. How that trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, whatever it is, leaves you with a new awareness, perspective, insight you didn't have. But I had been through death of a loved one. I'd been through disease. And I was like, this feels different. I didn't want to assume all my study participants felt the same way. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Unanimously, it was different. Here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the entire self gets demolished. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, right? Like when you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't question the relationship.
Right.
You don't question your ability to trust. You don't question your sanity. With betrayal, you do.
Right. In fact, when it happened to me, the moment I found out, I actually lost time. I disappeared. I could feel myself go offline. Like it was felt like for me that my reality crashed. Like there was two worlds, what I thought and now what was true. And I felt them crash. And that for moments there for a while, I didn't exist in the crashing until I came to, but it was utterly destructive. I would say that the me there died that day. And who I am today is somebody new. Definitely.
Absolutely. And that version of you did. That's the thing. And this is why people say all the time, I just want to get back to who I was. Who you were doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Now you get to, and this is what stages 4 and 5 were all about. You get to take all the parts you love and you leave behind everything that doesn't serve. So when I say hard now, easy later, I mean a thought comes in your head. And here's the opportunity where you say, did the old me do that? Did it serve? No? Then it's not coming with me. And you take and create this version of you that never would have had the opportunity to be created had that not happened. That's trauma well served.
Yeah, it is. And it's a hard thing because that's a bitter pill in a way for me to swallow. That who I am today, I'm extremely grateful for that transformation. I just wish it didn't have to happen that way. That's the part that I find really hard. Yeah. But yeah, it definitely is reshaped. And I watch it reshape other people. But here's the thing. So on the podcast expert, I want to pursue more with the stage 3 that we tend to park and build a house in and maybe build our identity in. Let's talk about how to know if you've done that and what to do to start to break out of it so that you get rid of the victim mentality. But thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Debi. How can people find you if they want to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Thank you. Everything is at the PBT, as in post betrayal transformation, thepbtinstitute.com.
Okay, great. And are you on social media as well or not?
Yes, Debi Silber.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Debi. This was a fabulous discussion that I know could go on for forever. I really appreciate it today. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? You can find me at Carrie McAvoy, PhD. Or you can learn more about me and my resources, such as the Toxic Free Relationship Club, at carriemcavoyphd.com. And I'll see you back here next week.